when it comes to this technology stuff and integrating it into high performance settings, such as NBA teams or NFL teams, relationships are everything, man. Like these guys, they only care about how much you know after they know about how much you care.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to leave a like.
Subscribe and hit the bell for notifications for more future content.
You're listening to Studio 22.
My name is Jay Porterfield, performance scientist for the Los Angeles Clippers.
And we're here on Studio 22. I was going to say it, but I like it. I like that.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Jay.
Of course, man. Always glad to talk with you guys.
Yeah, man. It's good to see you. It's been a while since before COVID.
Definitely. It's been too long.
Yeah, crazy. How's everything in your world?
Everything in my world is great. Team life is great. Personal life, great.
Going from COVID to, getting the games and everything going, and how's that been, that transition?
It's actually been amazing. It's it was difficult times when you weren't sure if you could come into the facility, come to a game, and then teams had to go to the bubble. Just all that isolation was really, it was tough to deal with for I'm sure everyone. But we made our way through it, and now that we're on the other side of it, I'm really happy, and especially with this mask mandate now being lifted, it's like a proverbial freeing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm very grateful for it all. And basketball's been rolling now for, a year where we're able to go in person, but I'm just excited to be back, man.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we're glad to have you back,
Yeah, how long have you been in your current position?
This is my 6th season.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So prior to this, and obviously this is how we know each other well, I was at USC. Went to USC for undergraduate. I ran track and field, and my background was in biomedical engineering. So was always trying to kind of combine my love for sports with technology. And around the time that we were, graduating from undergraduate, a lot of these technologies started to kind of pop up that had medical application, but they were used in, or they were being transitioned into being utilized in the sports world. So it was almost like bringing a hospital room to a field. And like most people, you're kind of looking at that like, what? Why would I put this on? There's nothing wrong with my heart. Like, I'm fast. I'm in great shape. But just being able to like kind of monitor that stuff sparked my interest a little bit and made me realize that there's a space outside of what traditional biomedical engineering is that I could kind of lean into. And so instead of being skeptical, which I was technically, I just started asking more questions about it. And that led me to begin working at USC's hospital with a research group that was really into digital health technologies and kind of making patients the superheroes of their medical story. Being able to track things such as heart rate, sleep, to name a few. And, really just got the opportunity to integrate those types of technologies into athletic populations. And it kind of hooked and hit and met some people that were in the NBA space, and the rest was history.
It's interesting taking, that technology space, the medical space into athletics, because, if you think of like treating a patient, it's someone with, you could say like negative health, but then you take like an athlete who's, like you said, is at the peak performance, and then creating, how can you improve on that?
Yeah.
Like you're saying, heart rate, sleep, nutrition, all of that goes into everything they do. Why not try to be 100% efficient at all that stuff, or as close to as 100% as possible?
Definitely.
I invested in this 8 sleep bed, which we should get as a sponsor now that I'm talking about them. But they, you basically sleep on it, and they give you like a sleep score, and they can control the temperature and all that. And I got so into like looking at my sleep score and like seeing how can I improve, and like, it's just great. It's even if you're in good health, you can always be in better health, right?
Yep.
I feel like that's such an interesting part about not only athletics, like you can be better, but like health in general. Like you can always live healthier if you kind of focus on stuff like that.
At this level of athletics, it's all about marginal gains, man. Like all of these guys are top competitors at what they do. And so it's always about finding something that somebody else may be saying, I'm too skeptical to even try it. And then just vetting it at the least, trying to check out like what type of value can this add. I think with some of the technologies that are out there, some people can get lost in the scores, so to speak, or the metrics that aren't fully understood. And so I think that's where people like myself come into value, and just kind of being able to tease out like, okay, this metric is based on these basic metrics, which me and you can communicate on. So like in basketball, load management is obviously a hot topic very often. And so even within the jurisdiction of a team, you try to talk about load and like, what does load mean? But the number one thing that correlates directly with load is time. And so me and you can talk about time in minutes and seconds and hours all day, no pun intended. But to then convert that over to something that is directly correlated to it and pretty much is determined by it, but just has another meaning, and gets lost in context when being talked about by the media, it's kind of annoying sometimes. And so while load is a hot topic, hot buzzword, it's kind of like about bringing load back to what it really is, and that's just time on court.
So
what happens within that time on court.
Right, because if you have these players playing almost every night at this crazy high level, rest is literally like a part of the game, right?
Definitely.
It's like in order to perform at your peak, you have to be rested. So like,
yeah,
I could totally understand how that would be a little frustrating, because it's just a part of it.
It's time, right? To like you were saying, it's like, imagine, well, how heavy is this cup? It's not.
Yeah.
It's not how much it weighs. It's how
relative.
Long can I hold it here?
Exactly.
Because in an hour, it's going to be pretty damn heavy.
Exactly. And that's why I like to say the greatest form of load management is just substitution patterns.
Right.
You're pulling a guy in and out of the game to basically allow him to recover from the energy that he just expended. And you're putting in the second line of defense to give what they have because they've been sitting there. And then you just swap it in and out. That's load management.
At its most basic level,
At its most
right?
basic level.
So it's how do you take that and then expand it into like real life and gym time and missing, sitting out a couple games to really get back into it. That makes sense.
Yeah,
it's a good
definitely.
point.
And that's all based on scheduling, right? Like, how dense is your schedule? How many activities do you have to perform in X period of time?
The schedule with the NBA, obviously, they had the bubble and then they basically started a couple months after. So like that must have been a huge shock to people's systems, right? Like, how did people handle that?
Yeah, no, that was definitely tough, and it was. I'm pretty sure, and we'll have to look back at this. But that was the shortest off season in professional sports to date.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'd have to look back at the exact number, but I remember. We talked a lot about that, and just like, how are we going to get these guys to turn around and be able to perform at that level this quickly after coming out of the bubble? And a lot of that, like we just kind of just talked about, is based on recovery opportunities, and really just playing into the life that athletes generally live, right? Like, most professional sports players are asked to perform at their peak levels at nighttime, 7:00 at night.
Oh yeah.
And then there's all this arousal that goes on, and then they're just kind of expected to shut off at 11:00 at night and begin recovery immediately, so that they can wake up at 9 the next morning to do some type of training. And it's like, that's not really realistic. In the space of sleep, there's this thing called someone's chronotype, and it basically determines like the circadian rhythm that they live on. And I would say that a lot of professional athletes are trained to be night owls.
And it makes so much sense, because like, even if it's not like nightlife, it's like you go home to your family, but your body is still full of adrenaline.
Exactly.
Right. So it's like, probably stay up watching a movie or something, but you're still not going to be asleep by the
your
time
sympathetic nervous system is still super active at that point in time. Like,
right.
It takes a while to like calm that down.
I didn't know any of like the science behind that. That's like really interesting, because it makes sense logically, practically. Like,
Most people are set to live around light, like when the light is out. But
yeah,
and you would even think that most athletes are probably set to live around the time that light is out. But that's really not the case when you think about what times we're asking these guys to be at their peak levels. And that's from 7 o'clock to basically midnight.
yeah.
Are there athletes out there that they perform better in that space, like at night hours, or do you think like anybody can really get into that rhythm and find that flow once you're maximizing your rest recovery, maximizing your training, all that stuff? Or is it
I think the ones that succeed and last the longest definitely figure that out.
a little more resilient in that
They're a
space?
little, yeah, exactly. They figure out that schedule.
Interesting.
By the way, on the East Coast, it's 9 p.m., right?
Yeah,
So it's like even later, like even more to your point.
exactly.
Crazy.
Exactly.
What kind of I'm curious because I'm fascinated by everything health and wealth and health. Yeah, definitely wealth, but health and fitness.
We all love wealth.
Yeah, all of those things, all the good things.
But health is related to it. You got to be alive too.
Absolutely, physically and mentally. Absolutely.
Exactly.
So for me, a lot of my knowledge came from my passion for the space, health and fitness space, and also wanting to be, as physically adapt to what I want to do in life, which is, stay in shape, stay healthy, get my cardiovascular up, and also be able to, like my dreams and my goals are big. So I want to be able to have energy on those levels. So again, like Will's saying about the 8 sleep, I got one of those. I learned how to sleep, or the numbers, heart rate variability, all the stuff that goes into that for me. And then also learning my nutrition, my caffeine intake, my sleep schedules, it definitely affects everything. But then I started getting into more after having torn meniscus and fractured patella, multiple herniations, tears in my neck. And I've had all kinds of, sciatica, all kinds of different injuries over my years of lifting and training and working out in general. So I started to find, like you said, I'm not afraid to listen to adapters, first adapters, people that are willing to try stuff. And also for me too, that's what I've done over my lifetime of being in health and fitness is try things. I keep trying until I figure out what works, what doesn't, what builds the most muscle. I was very skinny, like
Exactly.
what sleep schedule is the best for me? Where do I maximize my circadian rhythm?
Exactly.
I didn't even know, never heard of that before, just now. But always trying to intake as much information. So my question right now, I guess, would be what technologies or things do you think would be the best for somebody trying to get healthy, stay healthy, or maybe it's applicable to what it's for, but are there any that like jump out to you that you love more than others?
Definitely. And there's really a lot of them in this space, but to be completely honest with you, I think the best technology that we have is our own brain and our own observations of, like you just were kind of talking about, what is best for us. Technology allows you to put a number to what you feel. And sometimes those numbers don't always match up with what you feel or see. And when that occurs, like, you got to start asking questions because you know your body the best. And that's one thing that I always, try to tell myself about our athletes is that, nobody knows their body better than them. So I may be seeing something that indicates fatigue, and I could discuss it with them. And if they're not feeling fatigue, then I'm not going to stop them from doing what makes them great. It's very easy to think that you're kind of an all-knowing person because you have the numbers. But a lot of these guys, really, honestly, all of these guys got to where they are without ever knowing me. And I'd be willing to bet that without ever having a scientist by their side at all points in time telling them like, hey, you should do that, you shouldn't do that. It was really probably based on feeling, right?
Yeah.
Like you feel pain, you feel when you're hurt, you feel when you're tired. And so I think the best technology, to be honest with you, is the brain that we're giving and just listening to your body. Sometimes I will trial different technologies or utilize different technologies. And the one thing that I always kind of come back to is like the step counter on my phone, because a lot of these technologies are just kind of glorified accelerometers, which is basically your iPhone. It can track how much motion, how much activity you have going on. And then from time to time, you get, kind of into one more than the other. So you start using things like the Oura Ring to kind of track your sleep and look at your heart rate variability, things of that nature. Or
do you recommend that, by the way?
I do like the Oura Ring a lot.
Okay, because I was thinking about getting it. So,
yeah, no, it's really cool. And I actually, before I came over here, I just got done meeting with a startup company called Crescent Health. They recently just rebranded to Crescent Health, but they utilize, they're device agnostic, but they utilize the Oura Ring and other sleep-based monitors to pair you with a coach who gives you insights on the numbers that are coming off of that piece of technology. So it's always great for you to be able to have a technology and learn on your own. But when you don't really necessarily have the time for that, it's always helpful to kind of have someone like pinging you and letting you know that.
Yeah.
And that was one of the coolest things that when I kind of trialed it, that I liked about it, was that there was a person on the other side of it. I think sometimes we get so lost in this automated world that we can easily forget that somebody or something is telling us to do something. Yeah. But when it's an actual physical person, you feel a little bit more inclined to like check in and like respond to them.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's why, like, when it comes to this technology stuff and integrating it into high performance settings, such as NBA teams or NFL teams, relationships are everything, man. Like, these guys, they only care about how much you know after they know about how much you care. They're really unwilling probably to listen to something that they've never had to utilize in their life unless they value you as an individual, you as a person, and trust what you're saying.
I mean, that's a pretty cool way to do things in general. You know, it's like, well, yeah, if you're not, you know, you can tell me everything in the world, but if I don't like you as a human, or I don't believe that you actually care, then you're just somebody else throwing stuff at the wall at me. And, you know, what do I need that for if I can already do it without you?
Exactly.
So it makes sense. You got to trust the person that, you know, when it comes to not only their livelihood, but their own bodies. It's like, I would consider that to be a very unique relationship.
Your body is the most valuable real estate you'll ever own, especially when you're a professional athlete.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to what you were saying, to your point of, you know, a lot of it is mental. There's numbers that really can't be, you know, you can't scale them. You can't figure them out because you don't know what someone's driving force is. You know, you don't know if they perform better under pressure. You know, if the fatigue is something that's actually like, oh, I was tired when I was younger and I went through X, Y, Z, and now my mindset is if I ever get tired, I'm going to do twice the work. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, there's like undefined.
Some people thrive in those moments.
Absolutely.
And that's a pitching point. And you know, I'm at a point in my career where I'm really advocating for players to own their own data. Any data that's collected on them, whatever setting that it occurs in, they need to have some way of honing all of that information and like placing it in one spot, because you can pitch yourself using that type of stuff. You can pitch yourself to a team based on the fact that you perform well in clutch situations if you have objective information that shows so.
Yeah.
It's very hard to pitch that stuff if you're just telling somebody, believe me.
Yeah.
But if you have a metric related to it, it's very helpful.
It's kind of like the same with the technology, right? Like you said that one of the technologies comes with a human behind it.
Yeah.
And it's like the numbers are great, but if you don't know what the numbers mean, then why use the technology, right?
You have to be able to contextualize the information that's coming off of there. And I think nobody does that better than the person producing it.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, nobody's going to care more than, or should care more than the person producing it, right?
Yeah.
What's when you're tracking metrics like that and really diving into that space with all the technology and everything, is there a lifespan that you've been able to go? Like, is it, can I track for a month and get that info, or does it apply to the year? Is it time of years? Is it, seasons? Is it the lifetime of a player? You can see when they're probably going to peak and then go down from there.
Truth be told, it's on a daily basis. And then when we would deliver information, it's always, relative to self and then relative to population. And so that population may be team or NBA or age group or position. But because everybody is different and everybody has something that something different makes them tick, you always like to compare to self. Like, I think that's where you should start. Like, this is the highest distance traveled that you've ever endured during the regular season. Or this is a season high in that. So this is the peak so far. Or this is the peak number of these events that you've endured in this season or your career. It's very valuable to know that type of stuff. The same way, like a track athlete would know what their best speed was at the race that they ran. I think it's valuable for basketball players within my field, my profession. It's valuable for them to know like when these peak events occur, when they endure these peak events, at what part of the season is that occurring in, and then being able to modulate around that, modulate your training schedule around that, like,
and try to emulate that throughout the entire season. Then,
exactly.
Right?
You want to be able to replicate it, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
And there's so many factors. I don't play basketball. Just enjoy watching it.
Yeah.
But for me, physically, I got into basically bodybuilding when I was younger. And now it just became, just physically trying to sculpt. I'm an actor, so got to try to look good on camera if I can.
I got you.
But it's every little detail. The reason I love being physical is anything that you do shows.
Yep.
If you're cheating on your diet, if you're not sleeping right, if you're not, and if you're not training hard enough, if you're not doing X, Y, Z, like the full package. And then as technology's coming out, right, I've been learning, heart rate variability, learning my sleep schedule, learning the effects on different, supplements and nutrition and just diet in general, what my body, my blood type, the list goes on and on. We're hyper complex, right? But also using that intuition that I grew up with of like, okay, I knew that if I kept going to the gym, I was going to
build muscle mass.
Exactly. Yeah. But it was learning how I built it. I'm really tall. So I was like, okay, well, I did this other bodybuilder's workout routine and I worked out with him, but he was doing these half reps, doing these little things. I'm like, okay, well, you're able to get results at 5'6" that I'm not. If I do your reps and stuff, I don't have. I have to do the full range of motion. I got to load more. I got to do different, training. I had to eat way more, So it was learning that, and then also even my mental health too. I remember I would go to the gym, and I would have the worst days ever. I grew up with depression. I'd have the worst days, but as soon as I went to the gym and killed myself, I'd walk out feeling great. The endorphins are pumping, everything feels great. And then I remember I'm like, I know this is correlated. I know that I enjoy this because it's the time that I can really feel great about myself and heal, and then I would take that energy throughout the rest of my day. And then, and then that would seep into everyone else around me too, So trying to be the best version of myself, getting to that, only to find out, 10 years, a decade later, that studies came out about how, yes, it does improve your mental health. It does, it releases endorphins. It does do X, Y, Z for you, and so I love what you're saying because eventually there will be a quantifiable metric to go like, yeah, that thing that you thought was what it was. Yeah. It is, you know what I mean?
Like, did you win today?
Exactly.
For yourself.
Yeah.
And just like related to that conversation too, like, we all have to have individual goals, right?
Yep.
I mean, like you were saying, comparing to yourself. So it's like when I go to the gym, it's not because I don't even have a chance at this. So it's like, it's not like I got to look like Brock, right? Because Brock is in like the top whatever percentage of
it's an illusion,
athletes, whatever it is. But like, it's to feel good. It's for my own mental health. And it's like, it just happens that when I'm in the best shape, I feel the best, right? But it's actually a chemical balance in the brain as well. The endorphins, all that stuff. So like, I go to feel good and I just happen to look better the more I go.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, I think a lot of people, they'll look at the gym and they'll be like, well, I'm never going to look like Brock, but it's like, yeah, but you can feel better and you can like,
but you're also not supposed to, we're all uniquely individual. Right. And sports, yes, it's very competitive, obviously, but it's you bring your own uniqueness into the world. And to what you're saying, I always love going into like conversations like that because when I used to be a personal trainer and I would explain to people, okay, well, all right, if the best that's going to come out of this is that you're going to look better, well, guess what? That means you're going to feel better. There's going to be less guilt attached to, diets or food you intake or, the way you show up in the world. And then what happens if you feel better, you start to treat people better. And then everyone else around you treats you better. And then your entire life experience gets better. And for me, I've never found anything bad when you do it the right way, negatively connotated to fitness or to health. And back to your point too, it really does become, it's a mental factor, and so it's like saying, you ever notice when you're having a good day, it seems like everyone else is having a good day. Or when you're having a bad day, everyone's having a shitty day. It's that same thing. You're getting what you're putting out.
You start projecting.
Exactly. And everything, you react to things differently, right?
Definitely.
So if I'm in a bad mood, well, this microphone's a little too close to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
there's
Every
those
little
factors.
thing, every
Yeah.
little thing
And
just
I
kind of
apologize for like using you as a placeholder for like, peak
Disrespectful,
physical
dude.
condition. I'm just saying. Like,
I wish I was in peak physical condition.
yeah, no, but I'm just using it as a metaphor to try to get my point
That's
across.
the real reason we got Jay here, so I can steal all the secrets.
all the secrets. No, man,
Bro.
even when I'm not like working out a lot, which I'm guilty of currently. Like when we get into the dog days of the season, I definitely become less active. But if there's one thing that I always try to hold myself accountable to, it's just to try to move, try to walk.
Yeah.
I know oftentimes like the hotels that we go to are very close to the arenas that we play in. And so I'll always walk to the arena, and our security guard's always like, all right, you're going to be okay. And I'm like, yep, I got to walk. I got to walk. And then even like last year when we were in the playoffs, if I wasn't traveling with the team, I would go to the Culver City steps, and I would make sure that I walked up the hill the number of times of like the game that we were playing. And it was like, if they're doing their part, like I got to put in my deposit as well for my health. And so some
Awesome.
people think that you have to do like hundreds of things to be healthy, quote unquote, but you can make small deposits daily too that are also beneficial. And sometimes that just involves walking.
Yeah. Small deposits. I mean, any small sum, a lot of small sums
It adds up.
equal large, regardless
It
of which
adds
way
up.
you look at it. And not everyone, you can't, that's the thing too about fitness is it's your health in general. You can't just jump in and you're on a pro level. You
Yeah.
know, you have to build to it. Even the pros, and I'm sure especially when they get injured, it takes time to get out of shape. It takes time to heal from a recovery, and then it takes time to get back to that peak performance. So a lot of people don't look at it that way and say, like, look, I need to focus on me, where I'm at right now, and then how do I in a healthy way, a safe way, get to where I want to go, and realize it's just time in. It's consistency.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are kind of pushed into that mentality because they feel like there's a time limit, but it's like,
If you wake up today, be grateful.
Exactly.
That's it,
Exactly. It's very hard to look at life like that too. I think we're definitely afforded that mentality. Some people aren't necessarily afforded that mentality, and so you have to be aware of the different circumstances that go on within people's lives that may kind of make them tick a certain way or build habits the way that they build habits or obsessions even. And over time, I think everybody kind of learns, like we've been just talking about right now, like, okay, I could probably ease off a little bit, but like a part of what makes you might be your obsession in doing that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like I was saying about the driving force too. It's like before, you can use a negative driving force, whether you're bullied, if you're insecure, you're whatever, and you can do that, and you can use that as a fuel source, and maybe that'll get you to that peak point. But I feel like if you want to be real sustainable, you got to find the positive balance in that. And what is it that, I can take this and then I can turn it into a positive, and then that's my fuel source that'll last forever. It's not just willpower. There's so much deeper than what we think we're supposed to be doing, I guess. And even movement too. Movement is life. That's something that I learned, especially in the last 2 years.
Definitely.
I was told by every doctor, because my meniscus, my herniations, whatever, don't train, don't work out, don't do this. Well, I didn't do that. Back to mental health, that was my outlet, my rock, my stable, my ground that I would build on. And when I didn't have it, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I can't go to the gym anyways. I might as well order, a little more Taco Bell, maybe a little more pizza. I might do this. Maybe I'll get a little more lazy here.
You become stagnant.
You stop moving. And what happens when you stop moving? You're dead.
Yeah.
So the movement, just those little things like you're saying, like walking from the hotel to the stadium or doing whatever, those are everything, man.
Keeps you going.
And it's never easy, but it takes effort. It takes, a different outlook. I feel it's like I focus on having a gratitude mindset.
Yes.
And being grateful for every single moment. Grateful that I have coffee here right now. Grateful that we get to meet and have this conversation. Grateful that I get to wake up in the morning. I don't know what's promised an hour from now. I don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. I can still build and work towards that. But, I have right now only.
Yeah.
And what do I do with this time right now? And how can I help other people with this time right now as well? And that's, like you're saying, if you get busy and during the season, dude, it's admirable to me that you're putting in work still when it's just the easy route would be not to, right?
Yeah.
But you're also doing this to help other people.
Yep.
to be the best versions of them. And that is one of the most badass things I think you can do, man.
Definitely. I appreciate that.
Yeah, on the subject of gratitude, I do like a gratitude list in my head every night before bed. Like, just I start thinking about things I'm grateful for that day and overall, and it puts me in a good state, and it helps me fall asleep, and it helps me feel good. I think it's something everyone should do.
It's awesome, yeah.
Yeah,
And I always say, life isn't what happens to you; it's how you react to it.
How you react.
You change your reactions, you change your life. You change your habits, you change your life. And it all adds up to the sum of
I think
us being where we want to be, who we want to be.
habits, I think, is like the most important part of it. Like, how do you deal with, let's say a player starts getting off of a good habit? Like, how do you usually handle that?
Well, a long time ago, probably not a long time ago, but like some years ago, I read a book called The Power of Habit. And
Sure.
they talked about the habit loop in there. And all habits are, they work they work threefold. So there's generally a cue, which triggers a action, which ultimately becomes the habit. And then there's generally a reward that causes the habit to actually become fulfilled. And so when thinking about trying to reinitiate habits if they are lost, it's all about thinking about what the cue is and what the reward is. I think in the space of professional sports, the primary reward will always be the win, right? But in order to really kickstart something so that somebody can see the reward occurring, getting the win instead of the loss, because people don't look at losses as rewards, unfortunately, as learning points.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
It's like I just said earlier, it's like the relationships and the trust that you have with somebody, which allows you to know what cues them to go into acting in the way that you want them to. And sometimes that's just through basic conversation, acknowledging that they're there when they feel like, man, right now I'm probably being looked at as the person that lost us the game last night. And it's like, well, the same way that you're being looked at as that, you could be looked at the opposite if you were to be in here in the morning after the night that we lost the game, putting in your daily deposits, because people respect grind at the end of the day. And as a team, you're going to always be willing to, uplift that guy, even if you feel like, oh man, they lost us the game because of this mistake that they made, da 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 da. Like, if you see that person's dedication to what they have going on, and just their own personal work ethic as it relates to the team, you're going to be willing to kind of push that guy. So sometimes, or I guess my answer to what you just asked me would be cueing them through conversation, like what's going to make you tick to get you back in that habit loop.
Love that.
Yeah. I always find that hyper fascinating as well. Like, when it comes to acting, when I really want to break down a character, I start looking into, their Myers-Briggs, looking at their personality types, looking, there's love language too, how we give and receive love, which ultimately turns into, those cues that like are rewards or not. And even the mindset of failure, is thinking like, well, this is only a chance for me to learn from my mistakes. What can I do better? How can I show up? And it's when you fall down, how do you get it better at the end of the day? But breaking all that down, and like you're saying, it's one conversation, regardless of how you're having that conversation, that you say, okay, well, that is why this is not connecting here. Let's connect it. Let's fix it. Let's
I have
do
a
what we
weird
need to.
perspective on failure. It's probably not
Tell us more.
accepted by many, but like, I believe that failure is not an option in my mind, because ultimately when I look at failure, I think of it as stopping. The equivalent of failure for me is like what we just talked about not moving. It's like death. If you completely give up, that's failure. But if you take specific moments in life that you may deem as failures or mistakes or outcomes that you don't want to go on, and you say, okay, well, this is how I'm going to learn from this, and this is how I'm going to continue to move on and become better from that moment, that makes that moment not a failure. It makes it, in fact, a lesson, like a lot of people like to, talk about.
Yeah, no, it's. I heard something a while ago. It says, our greatest successes always come right after temporary failure. Temporary failures.
I think failures are all learning moments, and the only way it is an actual failure is if you don't learn from it.
Yeah.
and
keep moving.
100%.
For me, definitely the mantra after having my injuries and not moving, and then finally getting back into the space of moving and getting things going again is there's always a way.
Yeah.
There is always a way. If you can think of it, if you can think of something and you want to get to it, you will absolutely do it if you find the path to get there. And it's like, you might get a failure, which could be, a closed door in your face. There's a billion doors. There's infinite doors for you to go find your path. And maybe that one is leading you on the path that you're supposed to go, which if you look at it with gratitude,
Yep.
you will find your way.
You got to know how to pivot.
Yeah.
100%. So when it comes to failure as well, like there's some sort of quote, when it comes to like people like Elon Musk or like more money than God, but it's, you can fail 99 times and all it takes is one success too. Like, and I always think of that in business. Like I've had ideas fail in business, but you keep going, you come up with another one, and like, you don't wear it on your sleeve. Like you learn from it, you extract the necessary knowledge you need to in order to learn from it. And then you keep going, but you can't let that stuff stay in your head. You got to shake it off and keep moving.
Yeah, no, definitely. and I know we're getting real meta at this point, but a very, I guess, easy way for me to be able to look past things that others may deem as failures is to look at the bigger picture, right? Like sometimes you do things that you're not great at so that you can experience another person or experience a environment which you may otherwise have never been in. And so even though you're not good at it, you're getting this exposure which may allow you to exploit what you are good at in that environment. And then you can take that and utilize it in another environment and say, well, I had this exposure in this environment that I wasn't, great at, showing out and shining. And because of that, I was able to take away X, Y, and Z that are applicable to what you guys are trying to do. So I can maybe lead you to the river. I might not be able to show you how to drink from the river, but I now know how to lead you to that river or that lake.
I like that. I like that a lot.
That's awesome. I just randomly sparked, but whenever someone says like, I can lead you to the river, but I can't make you drink.
Yeah.
I always find that, you can lead people there too, but if they're not ready to drink or they're not ready to accept it, then, you're still doing your part at the end of the day, and that's on them. And when that person's ready to receive that information or show up and do the things that they need to do for them. But that's really, really cool stuff, man.
No, I definitely think sometimes fear can block you from your blessings.
Yeah.
And even in the space that I'm in and starting to recognize like, where I want to take this and where I want to go with some of the thoughts that I have around performance monitoring. It's like for a long time, I think I feared throwing that out into the world, feared throwing some of these ideas out into the world. But it's definitely time. And I think that there's a lot that's going to come from it. But like you said, you just have to be ready. It has to be the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And finding that path for you, man. It's like, if you're going to let the fear of failure stop you from doing it, it's like, well, what if, you do it 10 years from now, 20 years from now, whenever, and you're like, why didn't I do this sooner? It's leaving everything on the table because like I was saying earlier, what I feel is, we have this right now.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with this time right now? And I'm willing to, put my ego aside, but work on my fear, conquer my fear, or even let my fear drive me, whatever it is. But if it's going to make me uncomfortable, do not be complacent, whatever it is. If I think that there's something there, it's our job to go explore it, dude. I mean, I feel like we're explorers, and even going to different locations, like what you were saying, it gives you a different perspective. It gives you a different opportunity to view things. Not only maybe it's for yourself, maybe it's for someone else, but you realize really quick what you do and don't like and what works for you and what doesn't work. And so being able to analyze that for someone else too, it's like, well, learn from people that have already done that. But if you're also an innovator in the space, like what you're doing, got to be willing to take risks. You got to just try stuff.
You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely.
I think that really gives you a lot of perspective too, right? Like you may not agree with certain things that people think or say or believe, but recognizing that their perspective is a reality and that, the same way that you may not agree with them, there's someone else that doesn't agree with you. And
Yeah.
I think understanding perspective can take you a long way when it comes to relationships and being able to, gain the trust of people.
Absolutely. And like
'Cause you
even
understand it.
professionally, I mean, when I was working on Ocean's 13 as like a teenager, I wasn't used to waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning, but
Yeah.
I turned that discomfort into service of my long-term goal.
Yeah.
When I was, I think, 19 or 20, I moved to Belfast, Ireland, worked on Your Highness. And I never had lived alone like that in a foreign country before. I'd never like done all that, what I was doing out there, but it was temporary discomfort in service of my long-term goal and like what I
Exactly.
love ultimately, and
Exactly.
which is production.
Yeah.
So I'd very much resonate with that.
Definitely.
Pain versus pleasure.
Yeah.
Temporary pain can lead to long-term pleasure. And what we tend to do, normally subconsciously, is we'll pick the easy thing, which is the temporary pleasure that will end up being, which is, the donuts, the, whatever it can be, whatever that pleasure is for you. And then it learns to long-term discomfort. And so it's being able to understand that, see that, view that, and how do you interpret it? And then how do you say, oh, is this a temporary pleasure or is it a temporary discomfort or pain that's going to lead me to my goals? And so that is getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning. That is, doing those walks maybe you don't want to do,
Yep.
even training, at early hours, whatever that formula is for you. But being able to recognize that really helped me show up better for myself.
Definitely.
And then in turn, you get to show up better for other people, right? So
Definitely.
it's all correlated.
For people that aren't into this space of like medical technology or like performance enhancing technology, like what's a good introductory product that they could try? Like you mentioned like a step counter,
Yeah,
stuff
just
like that,
your,
like easy
your
stuff
phone,
to
like
kind of,
the Apple Health app. That's a big one for me. Is just being able to look at like the number of steps taken between days, between months, between weeks. I'd say that's like your general one.
That's awesome.
I'm blank. So during the pandemic, I did a lot of bike riding, and one of the apps that I used was called Strava.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool one. But simple is generally better. Like even with the high tech, advanced products that we will utilize, I try to make sure that I cling to the simple stats that come off of those products, because those are the ones that are the most interpretable.
Yeah.
And and once what you're saying resonates with somebody, that's where you see behavior change starting to occur. And then, after the behavior change starts to occur and, you guys have some understanding around what's the driving force, what's the driving metric that's causing this behavior change, you can start digging into the more complex ones that you might ultimately deem as like, that's cool. It's a cool way to look at it. It's a different perspective on how to look at this. But let's just stick to the basic.
Yeah.
Distance, speed.
So keep it simple, stupid.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Is that it?
Yeah.
I actually just used one of those. I have this watch that does that, smartwatch, and when I just moved a couple weeks ago in my house, and I went back and forth in the house, and I am not a runner. I don't really like long distance things, to be honest with you. I'll do sprints, and that kind of training, or slow walks, whatever.
Yeah.
But it all kind of correlates to the physique and everything that I want. But when I was moving, my watch clocked that in my house alone, I did over 12 miles in average on a day. And I'm like, 12 miles in my house?
Yeah.
Like moving
boxes.
Because
of the move, yeah,
this
exactly.
is crazy, man. But it was a cool metrics even just to see
That's
that.
awesome.
I'm like, I'm feeling.
It makes you realize that you could do it outside.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. And it just change your environment and kind of go from there. But somebody who thinks like they can't even get through a mile, I'm like, I could do 12 and I'm still fine,
That's interesting that you bring that up. One of the concepts, I just gave a talk to a class back at USC.
Cool.
And one of the concepts that we discussed was this idea of the dynamic mile within basketball. Like for me as a track runner, like you run around a Olympic track 4 times, that's a mile.
Yeah.
You run around at 8, that's 2 miles. So on average, our guys will run about, most NBA players will run about 2 to 2.5 miles within a game. But what goes unseen is what happens within those miles. They're not running in straight lines and just getting a stop afterwards. There's a lot of curves that go on within these miles. There's a lot of very intense starting and stopping, which puts all sorts of, stress on joints in the body that, may go unnoticed, because what we see as viewers is an amazing dunk, but we don't see the unloading portion of the jump that puts stress on the knee joint into the concentric phase of the jump, which puts stress on the quad tendon. And then ultimately we just see the ball go through the basket in this amazing exhibition of athleticism. But do we really know what went into that? Like executing that amazing jump? Very often, no.
Yeah.
And you have to analyze all that, right? I mean, you got to pay attention to that. You got to track it, and like you got to focus on every little thing, right?
Yeah. So it was really funny, actually. So the other night, Ja Morant, who's really exciting to watch right now, had an amazing game with the Steven Adams full court pass, where he basically shot the ball into the basket in midair for a buzzer beater.
Saw that.
And then he finally had, his amazing dunk where he jumps from, I don't even know where he jumped from, but he posterized whoever he dunked on the Spurs. I had the class basically watch the highlights of that game and describe to me what they saw. And it was very, what's the right word that I'm looking for? It was the descriptions were very superficial. We saw a dunk, we saw a crossover, we saw this, that. And I kind of challenged them to look at the game in a different light and become a little bit more critical of what they were watching. From a medical perspective, what are you seeing? What are you seeing that's allowing them to this guy to execute these different movements? And as that kind of prompted them, they began to think more about, oh man, like, wow, yeah, the different stresses on the body, knee going into valgus, inversion sprain of the ankle that probably wasn't even a sprain, but you see his ankle go into this, this inverted position. Those are the types of things that we kind of view and try to contextualize the numbers with. You got to try to place the motions with the numbers. And that's how you're able to explain it to players. It's like, this is what you did. This is what you saw yourself do. But this was a movement that ultimately could, too many of these over a certain period of time may be detrimental. The tissue may, not be able to handle the amount of load that you're placing on it in that position. And these guys are world class, right? So they can definitely sustain a lot more than the general public. But being aware of that and being able to know that is huge for them.
Yeah, they're also doing a lot more than the general public.
Exactly.
Well, that's so interesting too. I love the way you phrase that. Like, look at it more critically, and that had to go back to my experience on Oceans. Like, we had sets at Warner Brothers that were in separate studios in different areas and different places, but then you watch the movie and they're crawling through an air vent that leads to a hotel room, and it's like none of that stuff is connected.
Yeah.
And it was so crazy to me. But even but then that was before film school. So a film school completely changes your perspective. But to go in there and experience that and then watch the film, I'm like, but that wasn't in the same place. How'd they do that? It's magic. What the fuck?
Yeah.
So you just gotta look at things more critically, and then you figure out as a producer where to put each set and how you can connect it. I mean, we cheated a basement in the arts district for our horror film. We couldn't go back to the hotel we shot it at, so we had to film it in the basement of a warehouse in the arts district.
Versus Hawaii.
Versus Hawaii, which we wanted to go back, but it didn't exist anymore. So thinking more critically, and I love, especially young minds, giving them that lesson early on is very valuable. So that's cool to hear.
Yeah, I like to look at that too as I love the way you worded it with critical thinking and really looking at deeper than what's on the surface level. Kind of looking at it as, my perspective or my way of wording it was always looking at the root. What's the root core reason or cause of what's going on right now? How do we get to that to truly understand, whether it's an illness, whether it's an injury, whatever it is, what's the core of that? Where does that begin? Where does that start? And same thing with my own physical health, realizing the importance of working from the ground up, and
Definitely.
working the way that functional training and how my body actually works, how I need to warm up or train my muscles, my tendons, my ligaments, everything that works together and in a fashion that all comes together so I can sit here healthy, not in pain. So I'm able to have more movement and to enjoy life. And, the one thing that I think is one of the most important things we have is our health. I've been around people that with billions of dollars and they're on their deathbeds and they're sitting there like, I would trade everything to have what you have.
To just be able to walk around.
Exactly. To be able to see better, to do whatever it is. So putting value into that, there's no, I mean, you can probably quantify a price on it, but there is no real true price that you can put on your health, and so what you do is incredible for that reason alone,
Definitely.
How has the market for, sports technology grown in the last 20 years? Like, what have you seen maybe in the last 10? Like, how from everyday applications to like people using step counters and like being incorporated into an iPhone as like a basic service to this stuff at your level that's at the top of the market?
I'm really glad you actually asked that question, because truth be told, I think the market's been pretty stagnant. But I think that's about to change. And my view of the future of how sports analytics is going to work is that it's going to be owned by the athlete. It's going to be owned by the person that produces it. And they're going to ultimately be able to productize the information that they create throughout their career. One of the big challenges right now is that players they have the opportunity to ask for their information and view it. But in order for them to possess it, that's kind of that's a big challenge right now in this space. And primarily because they don't have a place to put it. But I do think that that's going to change soon. And that's where I see this kind of being revolutionized is once they have a place to put it, they can begin telling stories around it. And they can begin doing things like not only owning moments such as the amazing dunk they had or a game winner they had, but also being able to own moments like injuries that they endure and what they did to get back from that injury. That's where the data is going to become, it's going to become more alive. And then ultimately, once the player is able to own the information around what they did to not only what happened leading up to the injury, but also what they did to recover from the injury, they're going to be able to ultimately sell that. Like you're a 15-year-old who tears your ACL. I tore my ACL when I was at my, the peak level of my career. This is what happened leading up to it, and this is what I did following that. You're going to be able to sell your recovery methods. You're going to be able to sell your process back to the general public. And you might not even be playing anymore. And so for somebody to be able to tap into what some of these high-level players did at the peak of their careers is going to not only be an opportunity for the consumer, the aspiring athlete, but it's an opportunity for the players. And it's going to take them, the players recognizing right now that they have to own and possess that information throughout their career in order to eventually sell it back.
So what would be a concrete example of that? Like if we see someone jump really high on a big dunk, could they be like, it's the exact height that they jumped off the ground on 1 foot? And then, or is it more of like,
it could ultimately be anything, man. Like it could be the shoe they were wearing, what they ate that day, any distinct interventions they had made in their training leading up to that season. It could be whatever they want the narrative to be around it, whatever they felt led into it, right? And one thing that I like to talk about a lot when I discuss this with people is in the past, if you wanted to be like your favorite basketball player, what'd you do? You bought his sneakers because your favorite player was probably Michael Jordan.
Right.
And that was his product. It was shoes. That's what he sold. That's what he sold that was tangible, at least. He sold a lot of other stuff, like from a mentality perspective, but he sold shoes. And you bought those shoes because to a degree you were like, man, I'm going to be more like this guy that I see flying through the air and winning every game and just like exhibiting this amazing athleticism. But you buying those shoes made you it didn't make you much more like Michael Jordan than the next person who bought them. But with the type of information that we have now on players, if they are to own and possess that stuff and be able to sell it back with all the contextualized things around it, what they were eating at the time, what type of training they were doing, on court, in weight room, that's the type of stuff that's going to make you be more like whoever that player is that you enjoy.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
My mind was more at like those sports science segments of ESPN where they're like, it's more about the metrics of like,
Yeah.
But I mean, think of like,
So those are all resultant though.
Yeah.
Those are all
Exactly.
resultant of that person's either training methods or just their natural ability. Like sometimes a person's wingspan allows them to catch those crazy passes that they catch. Sometimes someone's reaction training that they were doing at that time allowed them to catch that catch. So it's like, what are those things that you're doing that are leading to this amazing thing that we view in sports science? Like a lot of those numbers are the end result of what I'm talking about.
right.
Well, it's fascinating what you're saying because you're talking about also not only people at their peak performance, right, and whether that's them doing this amazing feat or it is an injury and recovery. You're taking that one person's view and experiences, and you're mixing it with, well, when you're on the highest level, you have access to people on the high levels that you're going to take information from them.
Exactly.
But then you also have their own interpretation, listening to their own bodies, and then even their own intuition, their own, however they do it, and you're mixing that all into one. It's amazing.
Yeah. I definitely think the easiest way to put it is it's going to be selling perspectives. And you sit and listen to commentators on different media outlets talk about what they know about a person or what they think about a person. And that's all their perspective of what that person is going through or does or is good at. When the shift that we're probably going to see is going to be that athletes are going to be able to have their own narrative. And right now that's done a lot through film. But as it makes its way into, the athletic training side and medical side of things, it's going to be them telling you their perspective around what they did leading up to each game. A lot of us don't know what goes into the mental preparation as well as the physical preparation for just executing on a game.
Yeah.
Let alone a single play. Like, what does it take for me to get ready to even step on the court and be able to execute my job?
It just sounds like, 10, 20 years from now, the caliber of athlete is going to be off the charts. If they're going to have access to these kinds of things, especially at early ages, and the way that it progresses already naturally, just like everything else, it's going to be insane.
No, I totally agree.
It's going to be insane.
I think we're going to have something like, you're going to tune into TNT for a game and you're going to be watching the game and somebody's going to get hurt. And instead of the commentators kind of discussing what they think is occurring or what may be occurring, there's going to be an immediate diagnosis of what occurred. And then you're going to be able to get these real-time insights about what Michael Jordan thought about when he ruptured or what Kobe Bryant thought about when he ruptured his Achilles, or what this person thought about when he had a Liz Frank injury in his midfoot. And so it's going to take away the speculation from the commentator and give it to you more from the perspective of someone who's gone through it, who was once at your level.
Which will ultimately help them heal faster and get back on the court, right? And
or at least lead them to the right lake to drink from.
Yeah.
right. No, that's amazing.
Definitely more entertaining as well.
Yeah.
And you'll see it on TNT, and it'll probably have been sold from the athlete to the media outlet, but then similar to a subscription model, as a aspiring fan who, may have just had a similar injury, you're going to be able to purchase that in some form. And that's where I kind of see and I don't know a lot about NFTs, but that's kind of where I see NFTs making their way into this space. Is like, can you own that person's injury moment and the stuff that comes along with it?
Yeah, that was when you were first talking about it. I was like, it did feel like NFTs. That's my first correlation that I was thinking. I was like, this is very interesting. You know,
Well,
because with NFTs, it's not the actual video that you own. It's the thing that comes behind the video. It's the access to this community. In this case, it'll be you own the moment of the injury, but then you also have this proprietary access to the athlete's mindset.
Well, I would still argue that, TNT or ABC or ESPN would own the actual injury because they'll own the footage and that'll still be...
Unless they get bought out by crypto.com.
Well, the arena already has, so you guys are probably right. What do I know? But you don't even have to go that far back in time. You can go back to like Pat Hayden would always say, he spoke at one of his classes at USC, came in and like talking about his summer workouts. They would do like jumping jacks and run a couple laps and like that was their workout. And I'm like, okay, that wasn't even that long ago. Like, and now we're at, now we're crazy places. So like you don't even have to go that far back to think about, different habits and
that was approaches. A different type of athlete, man. Different type of athlete. I think a lot of people back in that day, it was kind of almost like ignorance is bliss. Like their pain tolerance was a lot higher because they just were unknowing and they were like, look, man, my ability to step on that court is my livelihood. So yeah, I feel some pain and I kind of can't walk, but let's go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nowadays, there's just so much more technology and information and medical advancements that you're kind of like...
A touch is a foul. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're kind of just like...
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But and then players also realize that they are the product, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not going to mess with the product.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we could go on and on about like the differences between the NFL and the NBA, but it's NFL, they have helmets on. Simple. It could be as simple as that. Like it's a lot tougher to brand yourself in the NFL, unfortunately, and a lot more physical punishment. But yeah.
But still, yeah, your body as your product, as well as you perform, is what's going to get you the notoriety, the ability, everything too. So.
And it's important to distinguish between the two. I meant more of like marketing, not like physical product. Yeah.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on, Jay. We had a blast with you.
Definitely, man. I'm always grateful to talk with you guys.
Oh, so we can book you for the next 10? It's cool.
Yeah. Definitely. Let's get it.
I don't think my brain could. I feel smarter after that conversation.
We talked about chronotypes.
Yeah, that's right.
That's amazing.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, thank you for your time. That was awesome.
Of course. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to drop a like if you enjoyed the video.
And subscribe and hit the bell for a whole lot more to come.
Thanks for tuning in to Studio 22.